right, in this lecture, we're going to go through the Photoshop menu, which is up here at the very top of your desktop. If you're using a Mac, it should look exactly like mine. If you're using a PC, I'm not exactly sure if the layout will be a little bit different, but it should be pretty similar. Over here, this is just a Mac default kind of menu item. You don't need to concern yourself with that. File, this is where you can use to open new documents, create new documents, open new documents. And there are a number of menu items throughout this entire list here that you probably won't ever use, or if you do use, you might use it once in a lifetime of you actually using Photoshop. I like to apply the 80-20 rule when it comes to a lot of these menu items. About 20% of these menu items I use to get 80% of the results. There are a lot of items that I don't use and that I will never use. And I imagine that will be the same for you. Now, that doesn't mean you can't look into it further, but I'm not going to cover the menu items that will just be a simple waste of your time and will not actually further you in your design career, creating websites, or graphics, or modifying images. So with that being said, let's keep going. Basically, Browse and Bridge, Mini Bridge, Smart Object, you'll never really use those unless you use Adobe Bridge. If you're a photographer and you have Adobe Bridge to manage your photos, then fair enough, you might use that. Open Recent I use quite often. It basically has a list of the recent files you had open in Photoshop, and you can conveniently click them to open up quickly. Close all. Those will basically close these tabs, but you can easily do that by hitting the X right here. Save as, those are pretty standard. Saving the document or saving the document with a new name. Save for web, this one is actually very useful. I use it all the time. It's basically one of the only save functions that I use because you want to save this image that for web, for your websites. They need to be optimized so that they load optimally and quickly without losing too much photo quality. So save for web, give you this dialog window, and you can see the stats down here of how big the image is. So currently 605K. That's way too large for a website to download. You can see 7 seconds at 1 megabyte per second. That's way too long. So basically, you can change the image size here by modifying the percent or whatever exact pixel width you need here. You can also change up here the preset from GIF, JPEG, PNG. It's pretty common web file extensions. JPEG usually gives you the best for images. For photographs like this, they give you the best file size with the best quality. So that's kind of what you want to do. Get the lowest file size with the best quality that you can get. And so there's kind of a magic number or magic kind of area that you want to aim for. And so you can experiment here by choosing high or, say medium. You can start to see some pretty bad photo artifacts here. And it doesn't look very good. The compression's bad. Maximum is a little bit too high, but you can probably get away with, very high or high. You can also fine tune it here in the quality, and that will give you a better image size. And then you'd hit save that in your somewhere on your computer or within your website directory, and you're off to the races. But we'll get there when we get to the web development section. Moving on down, generate, revert, place embedded, linked, import, export, share on Behance. I've never used these, and you probably won't either unless you have a Behance account and you want to share your specific document on Behance. But again, these are pretty useless to me. And based on my experience, I don't think you're going to find use in them either. Automate, scripts, file info, print one copy. Fairly straightforward stuff, but I don't use these either. Moving on to edit. This is where you can edit, undo, go forward, go backward. You could do certain things like cut, copy, paste, pretty standard stuff. Right now they're grayed out because there's nothing to copy or cut because I haven't selected anything. Spelling and stuff, I've never used this. Fill and stroke, I've never used these either, specifically in here. If you wanted to just fill in the document with a specific color or pattern, you could do that. Content aware scale, puppet warp. Never use these. Free transform and transform. This is if you wanted to transform the image size or whatever, but you can also use Command T to achieve the same effect. Define brush presets. That's if you wanted to create your own brush. So I can take this whole image And now this is a brush. So I would never actually do that, but you can create a brush. And then when you choose brush in your toolbar over here, you can actually choose a new brush. You can load a new brush, and basically you can choose that brush that you created. So I've maybe used that once or twice just for fun, but you can experiment with that, try it out, but you probably won't find much use in it when you're doing web design. Purge, presets, color settings. You won't really use these unless you want to change your color settings or color profiles. Keyboard shortcuts, if you want to customize your keyboard shortcuts, if you're into that, that's cool. Image, you could change the mode, grayscale, RGB, CMYK. You could change the 8-bit, so you can change this afterwards, even if you haven't when you created the document, maybe you chose CMYK, but you needed it to be RGB, easily changed. Adjustments, these are very common for doing photo editing. So if I wanted to change the brightness, contrast, levels, curves, vibrance, color, photo filter, invert, HDR, desaturate, all that sort of stuff, you could do that right here. But you can also do it over here in your adjustments. It's a little bit quicker to do it this way. All the same things are right here. Moving down, auto tone, contrast, color. That's if you wanted to quickly edit a photo. So auto tone Photoshop will try and figure out the best way to modify the tone of the photograph. So let's see what happens. You see that changed. Auto contrast. Nothing really changed there. And auto color. And so modified. So fair enough, it looks pretty good, but in some cases it makes some drastic changes that you don't actually want. Maybe in terms of science and math, like Photoshop, the algorithm they use, changes and modifies the photo to what they think is a good edit, but that might not necessarily be in line with what you think is a good edit. So I'm going to go ahead and undo those changes. Moving down, image size, canvas size. That's if you wanted to change the actual image size. You could do that right here. Pretty straightforward. Canvas size is the size of the canvas. So this, what the image is in, that is the canvas. And this is the image. So you can change the size of the canvas to be larger or smaller than the content within it. Moving down, image rotation, you can rotate the image. You could trim the image. That's if you had pixels on the outside, white pixels. So if I were to have an image that was this big and I wanted to trim the canvas to be exactly the size of this image, I can go ahead and hit trim, transparent pixels, boom, there it is, done. So sometimes that's useful. Reveal all, that's if you were to reveal all your layers, duplicate, apply image calculations. I don't use these. Same with variables or analysis. Moving on to layer. This is if you wanted to do some things with your layers. I've never actually used this specific menu item or its sub items. This is if you wanted to create new layers from this menu. You could do things like this, or you could duplicate layers, but you can also do it right here, just by clicking these buttons. New layer, new group for layers, and then this one is create a new fill or adjustment layer, which we'll get to eventually. So yeah, I don't really use these, so you can probably just leave this, this menu item entirely alone. Type, I don't really use this unless you were to modify the type, if you were to type text, and again, you could just change it over here. Select, this is if you were to make a selection. So marquee tool, and I selected this, just a sample of the sky here. Now I can deselect, I can inverse the selection, I can select all layers, I can feather the selection. You see it kind of rounded it out a little bit. You can do certain things like transform selection if you needed to modify that selection. And yeah, and then basically that's, if you made a selection, you wanted to play around with that, the settings. Filter, this is if you select a layer, you can go ahead and you can do certain things to create a certain effect. And basically this is all you need to do is just play around. This is how you learn how to do this. So if you wanted to blur the photo, you could choose a certain blur setting and it will blur the photo. You can sharpen the photo, you could stylize the photo, do a bunch of different things. So I would just play around with that. That's the best way to learn what these are. Rather than me going through every single one of them, showing you the settings, I'd put you to sleep. And nobody wants that. Moving on to 3D, I've never used this. I don't know why you'd use this. Maybe you can create 3D stuff in Photoshop, but there's probably better places to create 3D stuff. So skipping that. View, you won't use this very much. This is just if you wanted to change the proof or if you wanted to zoom in, zoom out, but you can use that by going Command plus or minus, 0 or 1. And then if you wanted to show the grid, you could do that. Or if you wanted to create a guide, basically to help you design something, you just drag from the ruler here down, and you could just create a guide. And same from this side. Let's say I just wanted to just create a guide where I can easily select my head. Let's just do that. Whoops. So there we go. There's my head. Then I can go and hit the selection, and then it will lock to those guides very easily, like a magnet. And there we go. Now I selected my head. And you can use that for like creating a nav bar if you need to do that. You have specific pixel widths. So you have a nav bar, and then you have another width. You can create guides to help create a grid so you can easily design everything pixel perfect. You can view and clear guides. You can also show the ruler, or you can hide the ruler. You could do the same by going Command R. And then window, this basically helps you arrange your workspace. You can turn on and off these settings over here. So you could turn on paragraph, and there it is. If you wanted to see something like the histogram will show up. You could do that sort of stuff just in here. If you lose something, this is where it is. And then help is if you need some help. So that is basically it for the menu. Pretty straightforward. I'd suggest taking a little bit of time after this lecture just to play around, create a new document, and just fiddle around with what you know so far. You don't really need to create anything amazing yet, but just to familiarize yourself with the menu, the palettes, and the toolbar. All right, see you in the next lecture.